This month we have learned a lot about contentment, which by now you all know means learning to be okay with what you have. And we wrap up this month by learning how true contentment can help us take the focus off of ourselves. You see, when you're content, you're not so focused on your own needs. And when you take your eyes off of your needs, it helps you see the needs of others. In 2 Corinthians 8, we hear of a church who became famous for their generosity, even though they were not a wealthy group of people. The Apostle Paul says something very interesting about them. He said, in the midst of a severe trial, their overflowing joy and their extreme poverty welled up in rich generosity. How does that happen? You see, their joy was that they knew Christ, and they knew they could do all things through Christ. And when you learn to be okay with what you have, you actually realize you don't need all that you have. And then you see a way to take what you have to help those around you with what they need. Please spend some time reading these 5 simple verses about this amazingly generous church, so that this Sunday we can show our kids how contentment can change how we see what we have, so that we can understand how we can use it to help those around us. Bottom line for this week is you can always use what you have to help someone else. The first activity is called Items to Help, and this is a Bible story review. And all you're going to need is a very simple bag with a bunch of random things in it. And what you're going to do is you're going to have your kids line up in a circle, sit down on the floor, and you're going to pass the bag one at a time around to each kid. They're going to reach in the bag, grab one of the items. And those items are going to consist of a ball, a book, some pens or markers, sock, clean sock, a dish rag or a towel, box of bandages, stuffed animal, a bunch of random things, things that most of the kids are going to have sitting at their house somewhere. And then so as they reach into the bag and grab one item out, you're going to ask them, what is the item and how can you use that item to help someone else? And if a kid gets stumped, there's some prompts in the binder that you can use, or you can just help them yourself with some of your own ideas. And basically the idea of this game is that we're taking very common things that they all have laying around their house, and we're asking them, how can you use it to help someone else? Or how can you use what you have to help those around you? And then you could read the story of the Macedonian church that we just talked about in a large group, and talk to them about how they were a small church, they didn't have much, but they were content, and they learned to be okay with what they had, and they saw what they had, and they saw ways that they could use it to help those around them. And that's what contentment will do for us. When we learn to be okay with what we have, we realize we can take what we have and help those around us. And to wrap up this activity, you want to talk to them about that sometimes as a kid, they think to themselves, how can I help? How can I do anything? Because I'm just a kid. But this activity just showed them some very simple and basic ways they could use what they have to help those around them. So just remind them of the activity and remind them that with Christ in their life, they can do anything. And God can give them the wisdom to take what they have and use it to help those around them. Our next activity is called Memory Verse Hide and Seek, and this is a memory verse activity. So you're going to spend a couple minutes talking about the value of God's Word and how to find it. And if you think some of the kids can attempt it, ask them to look up Luke 12:15, which is our memory verse for the month, and read through it one time just to remind them of what the verse is and who's speaking and who Jesus is speaking to, and a little bit about what he's talking about. But then you want to jump into the activity. Now, I will suggest we're not going to do the activity in the binder because it needs a bunch of space to hide stuff in, which I don't think we really have that ability in our rooms. So what I suggest is taking the cards, which have the memory verse on them and numbers in the lower corner to help our non-readers, and play a memory type game with them. Lay all the cards face down in a grid format and give each person a chance to pick 2 cards. Now, instead of having 2 matches being a winner, they're going to look for 2 numbers that go together, like 1 and 2 or 3 and 4, so on and so forth. So they try to play the game looking for numbers that go together in numerical order. So I would give that a shot instead of doing what the binder says to do. And at the end of the day, they're putting the verse in order. And if your kids can read it, ask them to read it with you out loud. And if they're non-readers, just ask them to repeat it after you. And then wrap up the activity by just reminding them that Jesus spoke these words, and talk to them a little bit about what it means to watch out or to be on your guard for wanting more and more and more. And just remind them of the bottom line for today and what contentment means, which means learning to be okay with what you have. Final activity is always pray and dismiss, and we did not do the activity that is referenced in the binder, so just completely disregard the activity in the binder. And what we're going to do is we're going to pray. We're simply going to pray for our kids that going into December, getting ready for Christmas, that we would have strong contentment muscles. And just pray for the kids, each by name, if you have time. If you don't have time, just say a quick prayer over your kids just before they leave.